was telling Cheryl, she's not being honest with us. She's telling us she dabbled in witchcraft. That's baloney, man. That stuff that's going around through this house at night is not something that happens when you dabble. So anyway, it culminated to us. We were on our way to a camp in Oregon. I was the speaker at a camp. On that trip, we went through an Indian reservation, and it was Winnemucca. It's a large Indian reservation in Nevada. And when we came onto the reservation, and I was driving over 100 miles an hour because we'd had to stop because she would go demonic, and we'd have to stop and rebuke demons. And I was falling behind, and I was going to be late to be the keynote speaker at this event. So I was doing over 100 miles an hour. And when we came onto that Indian reservation, all the doors of the van, we were in a Chevy van, all the doors came open, all the seat belts unlatched, and this spirit tried to throw her out onto the highway at 100 miles an hour. Fortunately, she was a little gal. I grabbed her by the hand. She was on the passenger front. I grabbed her by the hand and pulled her back in. Thankfully, got the van stopped without anybody dying, but it was quite a wild ordeal. There was a spirit that had taken her over, and I said, who are you? And it said, I'm the power spirit of the Winnemucca Indian Nation. And I said, what are you doing in Ramona? And this spirit laughed at me and says, Ramona, huh? You don't even know who she is. You don't even know who she is. You don't even know who she is. You don't even know who she is.
The history of our earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Well, welcome back to Blurry Creatures podcast, where Luke and I, we started this, kind of in the whole what the heck's going on in our world era. And, we're bringing on a pastor today who kept his church open through everything. He kept his church open through the whole COVID thing, and it's hard to do in places. Maybe in the South, that's not so hard to do, but he did it in Northern California. And Dave is, regardless of right, where you are and sort of looking back in history and thinking about what happened and all the narratives and who was in power and why not, and politics and stuff, you got to understand that, it takes a lot of courage to stand up in the middle of those times and stick to your guns and realize that this is a spiritual war we're all in. And I think we've made a good case on this podcast that, most of us kind of grew up a little bit asleep to all the blurry stuff going on all around us. Unless you have experiences at a young age with the spiritual realm, a lot of it is just stories, and that's how we learned. But today we're praying on Pastor Dave Bryan from Church of Glad Tidings, which hits home for me because that's where I would prepare every tour I was on. I can't believe how, we would practice at his church. And
small world, very small
world. But you can see the spirit of Dave in this episode. And I hope you guys give this an open mind, because I get it. Our podcast can sort of blow the doors off a lot of things. And Luke and I ask questions and sit back and let people take us for the ride. And we don't really grill people or yell at this debate going. It's just, hey, what have you learned? What have you been through about it? In a sort of a comfortable space. A safe space. A blurry space.
Yeah. A blurry space. No, and Dave's been in the game for a long time, doing his ministry, and like with a lot of people, deliverance stuff is a hot button, right? In church spaces and Christian spaces, and so Dave's got a lot of years under his belt, interacting with the spiritual realm and then supernatural, and that's a lot of what we talk about. Whether it be Dr. Mike Heiser in his book The Unseen Realm, it's just bringing the supernatural paradigm back into focus for Christians. And Dave is doing it. He's living it out. He's putting one foot in front of the other in this space. So we're grateful for his time. He's got some crazy stories. Some of these stories have been out there on the internet and made waves. And so we've been trying to do this for a while. Actually met Dave at Birthright, Tim. Grateful to have Dave on to share his stories and share about his ministry. As with all of our episodes, as Nate said, keep an open mind, and I think Dave's stories are worth listening to and worth thinking about. So
yeah, let's get Dave on the show and see what he has to say. All right. Welcome to the podcast. Dave Bryan, you pastor of the Glad Tidings Church in Yuba City. Which is dear to my heart. That was, lo and behold, where my band would rehearse in the space, in the offices in the back before all of our tours back in the day. The Greenitz family, obviously Joe was in Sherwood, so I spent a lot of time there in Yuba City getting ready for every tour that we went on. So thank you so much for I love what you guys do. I love the boldness you guys had, especially during the last couple of years. You guys just kept going, doing your thing, and I think that was the right decision now that we're looking back.
Yeah.
To just, hey, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing us, and we're not going to shut down, and we're not going to give into these things, which is really hard to do in a place like California. And Luke and I grew up in Northern California.
Yeah, you're right between where the our ancestral homelands, if you will, Nate. Yeah, Nate's from Sac, and I grew up in Chico.
Oh wow!
So I spent many times. We used to play hoops and everything, and football and everything else in Yuba City. Yeah. So very familiar with your neck of the woods, and
wow,
it's always fun. Always fun to have.
I still remember the Christian school heckled me because I was the redheaded kid on the free throw line.
Yeah.
And someone yelled O'Doyle rules when I was shooting a free throw.
That is pretty brilliant, actually.
And the Yuba City Christian, the whole stadium started laughing at me while I was shooting a free throw. So it was really nice.
Did you ice them though? Did you just ice them and tell them to give them the quiet sign, or what?
Yeah, I was like, "You're up there, I'm down here." There's a reason for it.
There you go. Come on.
That is amazing.
I got it all out. Yuba City, I've forgiven you. All right. We got Dave on the show today.
That's great. Yeah.
So, Dave, you got some blurry stories, but we can kick it off with Bigfoot. Dave, what do you think about Bigfoot? What do you think that thing is? Do you have any thoughts on the big fella in the woods?
Oh, yeah. So, you want to go straight to Bigfoot, huh? Okay.
That's where we always start, man. That's how the show starts. You
guys are from Northern California. You know, my thoughts about it. Well, let me start by saying I think that the traditional view of the spirit realm is way, way, way off. So of course, there are demons. They're part of the group of evil spirits, but they're disembodied spirits of the ancient evil dead. Because they don't have bodies, they try to use human bodies to find expression in the time-space continuum. And unless they can borrow a human body and work through it, they're just unseen specters, they're ghosts. And most people think that's the extent of evil spirits, that everything's either an angel. Most people think, they wear white, they have blonde hair, they always carry swords. They're about 6'2" and good looking. But anyway, the truth of it is that the spirit world is more populated than the natural world by far. And we have between 10 and 50 million different species in this time-space continuum. So if we start there, then we back up from there and say, of all these spiritual beings, most of them, if not all of them, are either clearly in the service of God or they're clearly opposed to God. That can be argued. Some people think there are, just like the human population, some people think there are beings that haven't made a firm commitment for or against God. And I don't know that it really even matters if we go there or not. But if we say of all these spiritual beings, i.e. non-human entities that exist in the celestial or the spiritual plane, if we divide them into evil spirits and good spirits, then we can begin to say, okay, what kind of a thing might the Bigfoot be? Now, I think what it isn't is a big hairy ape that is just exceptionally good at hiding. I don't think that makes any sense.
It's very sneaky guy.
Very sneaky, right? Yeah, the winner of the universal hide and seek competition.
Yeah, that sounds like a T-shirt, Dave.
Yeah,
I kid. There's a few of those out there.
But anyway, so I think that they're evil spirits. Let me just say this. This is secondhand information, but good information nonetheless. I have a good friend who is an ancient language expert and works for the Pentagon and sometimes overlaps with the Department of Defense. I've spent quite a lot of time talking to him about all things weird and wonderful. He says that there are Bigfoot entities in captivity in Dulce, New Mexico, and that he's seen pictures of them and talked to people there about some of the details of their extreme physical acumen. He says they can run like 130 miles an hour and they have superhuman strength. So anyway, of course, as you guys know, just recently, after over 75 years of secrecy in the Senate hearing committee, they are finally admitting that interdimensional entities have been around for over 75 years. That they've been hobnobbing with the U.S. military, and it's been a litany of cover-ups and lies and sleight of hand and blah blah blah. So that's gone from the tabloids to the Senate hearings, where people are testifying under oath about interdimensional entities and unidentified aerial phenomenon. So everything's changing these days. Well, the Bigfoot appearances, just like abductions and on it goes, the alien grays, the little doctors, all these things that have been appearing, the black-eyed kids, all this stuff that's been happening for years, and really there have been tens of thousands bear witness to them. But suddenly there's some credibility because the Operation Blue Book and the whole military cover-up has come to an end. So anyway, now people are saying, okay, so let's go back and revisit these sightings and these experiences that people had. So I've never had one myself. I have talked to people who have seen the alien grays and Bigfoot, and I've got a friend who is a writer for Paranormal Magazine, and I met him because he interviewed me over the Anton LeVay situation and his death in 1997. But we've stayed in contact since then. And this might make a story for another time, but he just recently said that there is an Indian medicine man lives up by Mount Shasta that invited him up to connect with the Bigfoot. He says he talks to him every month at the full moon, and they talk telepathically. So anyway, my friend, Brett, he went up there to get in on this, and it was a full moon.
As one would, right?
Yeah,
You're not going to miss out. Yeah.
So he's sitting out there under a full moon and kind of dozing off, and he hears a strange sound and wakes up, and this shaman says they're on the outskirts of the woods here. They were in a clearing, and he said, I need to know if you're going to freak out if they come over here. And he said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, I'm not going to go any further here if you're going to freak out. he said, all bets are off if you freak out on them. And Brett says, what does that mean? He says, well, that means I don't know what they would do, but I don't want to be a part of whatever might go wrong if you freak out on them. So my friend Brett, who's a great guy, he's about 6'4", he's a big guy, but he said he just got to thinking, I don't know, what if they just freak out on me for no reason? So he said, I don't know if I should be here or not. And he could hear the noises on the outside of the clearing. And so the guy said, if you're not sure, you need to go straight to your truck, get in your truck and drive out of here and keep driving till you're way out of range. And so that's what happened. He never did see him. I asked him, of course, when I heard about it, I said, Brett, let's take the guy up on it. I'd love to see him and have that experience. And I have my own questions about them. He said, well, I think I PO'd the guy because he went and jumped through all the hoops for me to have this experience. Then I chickened out. So this news is just, maybe 6 weeks old. But I said, Brett, recontact the guy. Tell him that you haired up a little bit. You're not going to freak out, and you'd like to bring a friend and see if he'll let us make that connection. So we'll see. But
so wait, this is coming up, Dave.
Yeah, well, we don't have a date set, but where we left it is Brett's going back to the Indian shaman and asking if he'll give him a break for chickening out the first time and see if we can go up there on a full moon and have an experience. I don't know if they'd come out of the woods. If they're truly evil, they may not, because of the presence of Christ, which it's a determinant factor in these encounters. So I don't know if that would work or not. But anyway, if it does, I'll give you guys a holler.
Dude, that's right. We want the first. We want the first.
Wow.
We want the first story when if you get up there.
I'll do that for you.
All right, Dave. We'll hold you to it.
That is an answer.
That is my favorite. What are your thoughts on Bigfoot? I think we've ever had on the show. Honestly, that is. I love it.
Yeah, Dave, you just blew the wheels off so many things, and it's interesting because a lot of things you said, man, we could just keep talking about this the whole episode, but. You hear truckers talk about. You said they can run at insane speeds. Yeah. You hear truckers say they're keeping pace with them outside the window along the freeway. Right. And then I remember one of the first times my buddy, who was super skeptical, called me one day and he goes like, dude, so the ex-wife of my drummer, he was telling me that his wife saw Bigfoot run down this hill in Kentucky. And she said it was like an Olympic athlete on steroids hopping over logs and just sprinting down the hill and up the other side. And these things are something else, but I love your thoughts, and I don't know if I'd have the balls to go out in the full moon and hang out with squatching friends.
Love it's out Mount Shasta too. We didn't even touch on that. There's so much weird stuff.
Oh yeah,
what's up with that place?
Well, it's obviously a major portal. Yeah. Actually, the Sutter Buttes that are right. Outside our windows, actually at Glad Tidings, but. They're a midpoint in a ley line between Mount Shasta and Mount Diablo in the bay. And so there's a ton of spiritual activity on all of those mountains. But Shasta is, of course, by far the highest of those 3 points. And so, that's a major portal, lots and lots of activity up there. And so it didn't surprise me, to hear that it was up on the slopes of Shasta that this was going to take place.
Well, that's famously where that Politis story is too. Mm-hmm, yeah. Dave, if you're familiar with it, where the guy walks in, Nate, I don't know if it's the first or the second film, Politis film, where the guy essentially walks into nowhere. The footsteps stop and the guy's gone. Yeah. No backpack, no nothing. Yeah, that was on Shasta, among other weird things. And Lemuria and all the stuff that people talk about, J.C. Brown. There's so much weird stuff surrounding Mount Shasta.
Certainly.
Well, there's all these like rings around. There's these rock rings that are all around that area. I sent some photos to Derek Olson, and there's some megalithic stuff there.
Like wheels,
maybe
like medicine wheels.
Yeah, the wheels, which we talked about. Those are all over Bashan. So whatever's there, right?
Yeah,
super blurry.
Dave, you mentioned there in the story, one of the stories I know that you've told a few times, that your encounter with Anton LeVay. Of course, we were from Northern California, so I remember growing up and hearing about the satanic stuff that happened in Northern California, whether on Auburn and on the way up to Tahoe and those places where I remember being a kid and hearing about covens of witches and Anton LeVay, and there's this, I don't know how much this urban lore is, but there was a house, I believe in Auburn, or gosh, what was the other, Grass Valley area?
Yeah.
Yeah, where that was like where he lived, and kids would go there and a bunch of weird activity would happen. But you have a story about Anton LeVay and a wild encounter, and I'd love for you to share that story with us and kind of unpack the things that happened there, because I think it's fascinating what I have heard. And like I told you at the top, like I haven't listened to it because I wanted it to be fresh and first time for us. But I know that it's a compelling story that involve a lot of blurry things happening.
A lot of blurry things.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I grew up on a ranch in Idaho. My dad was he was a boxer and a gunsmith and a pastor.
Hot machine gun preacher. Look at that guy.
Yeah. He was a unique guy, but a good blend, because he didn't have a religious bone in his body, but he believed in the reality, the pervasive reality of the spirit realm, and didn't have a lot of experiences, but I thank God that he believed in those things and had an open mind. But in any event, it's a long story that I don't want to get into, but I really never fancied myself being a pastor, but we wound up being in Yuba City in 1987. Church of Glad Tidings was really struggling and they needed some leadership. I thought, I can do that for a while till we figure out, where to from here. Anyway, that's 37 years ago now. So,
right.
So we got involved, and
so you're just holding down the fort for a little while, Dave.
Yeah, just for a little while. Yeah, just till Jesus gets back.
That's right.
But
99 reasons that he comes back in 99, right?
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so we adopted this motto: find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. And so I didn't want to be a religious person, never have wanted to, still don't want to, but I knew that there was a God and that there was a kingdom of light, kingdom of darkness, and wanted to be on the right side of that. So we just started helping people, and the church started to grow, and we got involved in more and more community urgent needs. So one of those was the juvenile hall. And so we were involved in that. And there were several things that happened where kids told us that they were involved in generational Satanism and some really heavy and weird things. Well, I had also snooped into the Juan Corona murders. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but the Juan Corona murders are the largest satanic mass murders recorded in American history. And they happened not only in Yuba City, they actually happened. The bodies were buried, a bunch of them right on the property that we now own, Church of Glad Tidings. So anyway, because of all that, I started, reading books about it and snooping into it, and found out a little bit about Satanism and satanic rituals. And I was just kind of reading it to find out really our history and what was going on, and what we might be facing going forward. But in any event, we started encountering these kids in juvenile hall that were doing satanic rituals and whatnot. I was getting closer and closer to the reality of what lay beneath the surface of the community. Well, one day I was in juvenile hall, and we went in on Mondays and Saturdays at the time. I went in on Monday to talk to the kids. And they had a young lady, she was only 14, but they had her in a plexiglass cage sitting out in the lobby. And so when I checked in, I said, "What's with the girl in the cage?" They all laughed. They said, "Well, would you like to interview her?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" They got a big kick out of that. But anyway, they got the CO got his overseer, said the pastor wants to interview Bernice, the girl in the cage. So anyway, they unlocked this plexiglass cage. This gal was sitting in there, just staring at a small table or two chairs. She was sitting in one, and they just had her under observation in this big cage that was probably I would say it was about 8 foot wide, about 12 feet long, and top, bottom, everything. It was fully lockable, and she was sitting in there. So I pulled up a chair and was trying to be friendly. I said, "Hello, sweetheart." She's a little 14-year-old girl. She says, "I'm not your sweetheart." I said, "Oh, okay, point well taken." I said it was just a term of endearment. I was just trying to say hi. And she said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, why do they have you in this cage?" She said, "They're afraid of me." And I said, "Why would they be afraid of me?" She said, "Why don't you ask them?" I said, "Well, I will. Is there anything I can do for you?" I said, "I'm a pastor, and we come in here a couple times a week, and if I can help you in any way, I'd be glad to." So behind me there and facing her, there's a camera. And so she got down real low so the camera couldn't see what she was saying because it was at my back. So she got down with me between her and the camera, and she says real quietly, she says, "I need blood."
Wow.
And remember, I grew up on a ranch in Idaho, so I didn't have any idea what she was talking about. So I said, "Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm a pastor." She said, "And I'm not anemic." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, why do you need blood?" She said, "I'm addicted to it." And I said, I don't understand. We're all kind of addicted to blood. Without it, we die. She said, "No, I'm addicted to it." And I said, "You mean you drink it?" She said, "Yeah, I'm a vampire."
Wow.
And I said, "What?" She said, "I'm a vampire. And that's why they have me in this cage, is so I won't harvest blood from any of the other kids in here." I said, how do you usually get blood?" She taps her jugular vein. And I thought, I don't know if she's high on crack or I don't know what's going on here. But I said, you drink blood out of people's jugular vein?" She said, "Yeah, or their wrists." And she said, "You said if I needed something, you'd help me." I said, "Well, I'm not helping you with that." I banged on the glass and they let me out, and they were laughing. They thought it was pretty funny. But I had to go home for the day and sort my brain out. And I asked him, I said, this girl was actually drinking blood out of these other kids?" "Oh, yeah." So anyway, I went home and I thought that was my first experience of something that's way out there,
Right.
And my wife, her grandfather was a healing evangelist named A.A. Allen. And he traveled the world and he had lots of miracles of healing and whatnot. And so she grew up as a little girl in his big tent meetings, watching him cast demons out of people and whatnot. I didn't have that experience. So anyway, I was just trying to wrap my brain around whether this was a true story or not. I went home and told Cheryl about it. She said, "Well, of course it's true. Why would a 14-year-old girl tell you that she was addicted to blood?" And I said, "Well, maybe she was just trying to be sensational." And she said, "Didn't she tell you that the reason she was in juvenile hall is she tried to murder her mother?" Which she had. When I asked why she was in juvenile hall, she told me this story. Then later I asked why she was in the cage. She said it was because she was trying to get blood from the other teenagers. But anyway, when she told me why she was in juvenile hall, she said, I tried to murder my mother and it was unsuccessful. We beat her head in with a bat and threw her in the river and thought she was dead, and somehow she lived. So I got in trouble with the coven over it. And I said, "The coven?" She said, "Yeah, I'm a Satanist. And I was in a very powerful coven, so I tried to kill my mom." I said, "Why did you hate her?" She said, "Oh, I didn't hate her, but did a Judas ritual against her because she was trying to get out of the coven." And of course, at the time, I didn't know what any of these things meant. So I said, "What's a Judas ritual?" I said, "Well, that's where you betray somebody close to you." And so we took her out to the foothills to a campfire, but we planned to kill her out there. And we thought we had killed her, threw her body in the river, and somehow she survived. So now they found out what happened, and now I'm facing a lot of years for attempted murder. So anyway, So when I was talking to Cheryl about it, she was very compassionate. That's my wife. I was thinking, geez, Louise, I almost got attacked by a vampire, and your compassion is all going out to the vampire. But anyway, she said, oh, that poor girl. Can you imagine what kind of life she's had to be 14 years old, having already tried to kill her mother and being addicted to human blood. So anyway, I tell you all that because later we met her mother. And the way that happened is we were just having a regular weekend service. There was a prophet from Borneo that had prophesied over Cheryl and I. We were about to be face to face with the devil, and we weren't ready for it. And I told him, his name was Jack Sisler. I said, Jack, I don't want to be face to face with the devil. I'm just trying to help people, be a nice guy, help runaway teenagers. I want to pass on that face to face with the devil part.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you need to read the book of Jonah. When it comes to the will of God, you can do it of your own free will, or you can do it the hard way, and you'll be lost in a storm, swallowed by a great fish, and puked up on the beach. But one way or the other, you're going to make it to Nineveh and do what God asked you to do. So anyway, when I asked him about that, he said, well, God showed me you were supposed to be on the front lines of spiritual warfare and teach a lot of people how to do deliverance of spiritual warfare. So anyway, that's the backdrop to our story. Now I'm reluctant, not really wanting to do that, but I met this girl in juvenile hall, and a few weeks later, we were having a meeting at Glad Tidings and invited people to dedicate their lives to Christ. I think 6 people did that morning. One of them was a really rough looking gal that had metal braces on her face and screws into her jaw. And so I thought she'd been in a bad wreck. But anyway, come to find out the next day, she called and asked if we would come get her. She said, witches are trying to kill me. If they find me, they'll kill me. And I didn't know what to think of that story, but we picked her up. God spoke to my wife that we should let her stay in our house. And so we brought her into our house along with our boys there was a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 15-year-old at the time. But anyway, we brought her into the house, still didn't know who she was. Long and short of it, through lots and lots of wild experiences that we went through, figured out that her real name, she was going by Ramona Jarnigan. Her birth name was Ray LeVay, and her father was Anton LeVay, and she had been conceived in a satanic ritual with an Illini Indian witch back in Illinois. They're the power brokers of North American spiritism, because their patron deity is the Thunderbird, or the Piazza bird, as they call it. And that's the top of the totem pole, which the totem pole is the power structure of the spirits that the North American Indian tribes worship. But anyway, the strongest one is always on the top, and that's the Thunderbird or Firebird or the Piazza bird. Yeah. So anyway, Anton LeVay had done a power convergence to merge the powers of the Church of Satan with the powers of the Illini Indians. And so the whole idea was a sex ritual. Of course, Anton LeVay was big into sex rituals, which he learned from Aleister Crowley. But anyway, they did a sex ritual. Ray was conceived in that sex ritual, and she was slated to be a bride of Satan. You probably know about that. There was a worldwide offer for people to bring women that had been completely defiled to the point that they might qualify to be the bride of Satan. And so, of course, it's the exact opposite of the Virgin Mary, right? It was somebody that had been defiled so completely that they may qualify to bear Satan's seed. And that's the whole moon child, bride of Satan, that would get way down that rabbit hole. But anyway.
Dave, is that the same thing that Jack Parsons and the like were trying to do out in the desert? Was the same sort of...
Parsons?
Yeah.
Well, Jack, what they were trying to do out in the desert was the Amalotron working. They were
the Babylon workings, yeah.
Yeah, they were actually trying to conjure an elemental. And an elemental is something that comes into our realm and assumes a permanent form. And so they were actually, that elemental was meant by them to be the scarlet whore, or the whore of Revelation that rides the beast, right? So you guys probably know this, but Jack Parsons' birth name was Marvel Parsons. And all the Marvel comics are based on his experiences. And so Hollywood has made over 100 Marvel comics. They all have a Luciferian theme if you know what to look for. But the last one that hit the big screen was Doctor Strange and the Omniverse. I don't know if you guys saw that.
No.
But
I know I've heard it. I didn't see it.
Yeah, if you see it, it'll explain a lot to you about the Malatrol working, in which he felt like that he was betrayed by the Scarlet Witch. And anyway, L. Ron Hubbard was the other guy.
It was Hubbard. That's right.
L. Ron Hubbard, who started,
of course,
Church of
Scientology.
Science. Yeah, but they were both Crowleyite Luciferians, and so they worked together on this working. And a working is like a whole bunch of rituals that are stacked up. It's sort of like buying something on an installment plan. So, rituals, there's a certain amount of bloodshed, a certain amount and a certain kind that buys you credit in the demonic realm. And so based on the kind and amount of blood you shed, you can buy favors from the demonic realm. Well, that's what all rituals are based on. But a working is like you are saving up the worth of all that innocent blood for something truly fantastic. And so a working might be a culmination of, 250, 300 different rituals that you were paying it forward until there was a massive amount of innocent blood. And then you asked for something, truly spectacular. Like Aleister Crowley's first working was called the Babylon working. And he was asking the powers of darkness to open the abyss and to free the demons that are talked about in Revelation. The abyss is opened and demons pour forth onto the face of the earth. And that was what the Babylon working was about. And then there was the mysterious disappearance of Aleister Crowley. But in any event,
yeah, I got sidetracked there a little bit. But those are not related. But is the same thing that LeVay was attempting to do with the tribe? It was a working as well, but it was a sex ritual. We've talked a bit. We talked about Derek Gilbert at the top of the show, and we talked about the threshing floor and the ideas that these were places for sex magic type of rituals in the ancient times, right? Even the top of ziggurats, right? That's what we're trying to do with Babel, was to bring forth something by a rite ritual. Yeah. So this is what LeVay was attempting to do, and the byproduct is then Ray, who's in your house,
right? So Ray had been conceived in that ritual. She was conceived for the purpose of really being in the competition of the Bride of Satan ceremony. There was only going to ever be one Bride of Satan that conceived the Antichrist, the man of sin. But there was this, it was sort of like, Queen Esther was chosen in a beauty pageant. Everybody came, but there's only going to be one winner. So anyway, of course, that would have been a great honor for Anton to have his own daughter be the bride of Satan. So that's what he was hoping for. But anyway, getting back to that, we took her into her house not knowing who she was. Remember, her daughter had said that they beat her head in with a bat and threw her in a river. She told us that her name was Ramona Jarnigan and that she had been in a really bad car accident and broke her face all up. But any event, we had her in our house, and of course, all hell broke loose every night at the witching hour from 2 to 3. We just had something sensational happen, and so there were a number of weeks there where I was telling Cheryl she's not being honest with us. She's telling us she dabbled in witchcraft. That's baloney, man. That stuff that's going around through this house at night is not something that happens when you dabble. So anyway, it culminated to us. We were on our way to a camp in Oregon. I was the speaker at a camp, and we didn't know what to do with her. So we called ahead and asked for an extra cabin on the outside of the camp. And we were going to just try to do the camp and then work with her at night, because it was constant deliverance and exorcism with her. But anyway, on that trip, we went through an Indian reservation, and it was Winnemucca. It's a large Indian reservation in Nevada. And when we came onto the reservation, and I was driving over 100 miles an hour because we'd had to stop because she would go demonic, and we'd have to stop and rebuke demons. And I was falling behind, and I was going to be late to be the keynote speaker at this event. So I was doing over 100 miles an hour. And when we came onto that Indian reservation, all the doors of the van, we were in a Chevy van, all the doors came open, all the seat belts unlatched, and this spirit tried to throw her out onto the highway at 100 miles an hour. Fortunately, she was a little gal. I grabbed her by the hand. She was on the passenger front. I grabbed her by the hand and pulled her back in. And anyway, thankfully, got the van stopped without anybody dying. But it was quite a wild ordeal. And that's when I said there was a spirit that had taken her over. And I said, "Who are you?" I don't know if you guys have been around this, but you've probably watched exorcism movies, but spirits can speak through people and use their hands and eyes and mouth and everything. So it was very obvious another spirit had taken her over. I said, "Who are you?" And it said, "I'm the power spirit of the Winnemucca Indian Nation." And I said, "What are you doing in Ramona?" And this spirit laughed at me and says, "Ramona, huh? You don't even know who she is." I said, "Well, nonetheless, what are you doing in her?" And the spirit said, "She's defiled by the blood of a virgin sacrifice, and that gives me the right to kill her if she's on my territory." Well, all this is new to me, right? I'm just this a cowboy from Emmett, Idaho. So I said, "Well, I didn't know about that, but how do you know she's defiled by the blood of virgin sacrifice?" He said, "Oh, you humans are so stupid." The spirit said, "I have seen you coming for hundreds of miles, and I knew that you'd be coming through here, and I've just been waiting for you to cross over onto my territory." And I said, "Well, so you have a right to kill her. You tried to do that, and you obviously failed." He said, "Well, I'm not done yet." And I said, "Well, but you got to admit you failed. You tried to throw her out the window. It didn't work." And I said, "She's under our care now, and the power of Christ is greater than your power." And he said, "Oh, we'll see about that." And I said, "You really want to do that? You're the power spirit of this nation, which means all the other spirits are watching what's happening right now. And if we best you in an exorcism, that's going to be the most humiliating moment of your life." And the spirit didn't answer. And I said, "Listen, you know the power of Christ is greater than your power. So if you don't want to be humiliated here in a home game, why don't you just leave her alone and we'll take her off your reservation and never come back?" And the spirit says, "If you come back, I have a right to kill her, right?" I said, "Okay, if I come back, you have a right to kill her, but we won't be coming back." He says, "Okay, but a deal's a deal. If she comes back, I'm going to kill her." So anyway, the spirit left quietly. She came to her senses, didn't know what had happened. And I was angry because we had almost all died. And so she noticed I was angry and asked why. I said, "Well, I'm going to take you off this reservation and we're going to talk about it." Well, when we got off the reservation, I had her get out of the van. And I said, "I have asked you many times if you were lying to us. You've always said no. Your story doesn't match up. You've done a lot more than dabble in witchcraft and use a Ouija board. And you've been lying to me about it. A spirit just took you over, almost killed the whole family, and said you were defiled by the blood of a virgin sacrifice. And I want to know who the virgin sacrifice was, how you got involved, and who you really are." So she said, "Well, if I tell you, do you promise you won't kick me out of your family?" I said, "I'll tell you what, Ramona." That's what we were calling her at the time. I said, "I'll tell you what, Ramona, as long as you are honest with us we will go to hell and back for you and help you get free. But the minute I find out that you're lying, all bets are off. We're going to put you out of our house and out of the church, because truth sets people free. And you've been lying about everything that has to do with you. So who was the virgin sacrifice? She started crying. She said it was my little sister, Delina Starr. And I said, you killed your little sister? She's crying. And she said, I didn't want to. He put his hands over mine and made me do it. I said, who's he? She said, my dad. I said, who's your dad? She said, you promise you won't reject me? I said, yep, I promise. I need to know who your dad is. She said, Anton LeVay. And of course, I knew from studying the Satanic Ritual murders of the one Corona, I knew about Anton LeVay, knew he was in Northern California up in Grass Valley. So I just thought, oh, wow. So I said, okay, Anton LeVay is your dad. What's your real name? She said, Ray LeVay, but I don't want to go by that because it's an evil name. Yeah. I said, okay. What name do you want to go by? She said, I want to change my name to Deborah Joy Bryan. Bryan is obviously our last name. So anyway, I said, well, if you will be honest with us, we'll adopt you. You can change your name and we'll face this together. But I don't want to ever again find out that you were lying to us. And so she said, okay, well, if I'm going to be honest, I never got in a car wreck. And I said, okay, how'd your face get all broken up? She said, well, my daughter tried to beat me to death with a bat and threw me in a river. And angels of God came and rescued me. Well, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, this is totally bizarre. And I said, is your daughter half black? She said, yeah. How do you know? I said, I was in a cage with her. I said, is she a vampire? She said, yeah, she is. I said, yep, that'd be her. I was in a cage with her. And she told me what happened to you and that she was trying to get your demons because you were trying to get out of the coven and she wanted the power that came from your demons. She said, yeah, they did a Judas ritual and tried to kill me, but God saved me. And so she said, now that you know that Anton is my birth father, the Church of Satan is going to try to destroy you and your family and your church. And I said, well, the power spirit of the Winnemucca Indian just tried to destroy us and didn't work. So we're just going to push our chip to the middle of the table and bet on God.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how we found out who she was. And that was in June of 1997. The rest of June, July, August, September, October, it was wild every night. And of course, that's when we learned so much about spiritual warfare and deliverance, as the prophet from Borneo told us we were going to. But anyway, that led up to Halloween. And during that time, Anton LeVay would astral project into her, which is identical to the demonization. Only instead of talking to an ancient evil spirit of the dead, you're talking to a spirit of a warlock that's astral projected out of his own body or her own body. Then she's on the spirit plane. And so they can do the same thing that a demon spirit can do. If they have a right to enter a body, they can come in and talk through them and punch you in the face, kick you in the crotch. They can do all the kind of things that comes with the power to animate a physical body. So Anton would astral project into Ray and cuss us out and threaten us. And, you know, it was pretty gnarly there for those months. But we learned a lot. God always protected us. We knew that Anton hated us and was trying his best to kill us. So that gave us great confidence because he wasn't able to. And so all those months, he kept saying, when Halloween gets here, Ray Ray, which Anton refused to call her anything but Ray Ray. But anyway, he said, when the rituals get here, the Halloween or sowing, they call it, when the sowing rituals get here, Ray Ray will either be the bride of Satan, because she had already been through the 6 other rituals of defilement.
Yeah.
That they have to happen on consecutive Halloweens for 7 years in a row to defile you and qualify you to possibly be the bride of Satan. But anyway, she had been 6 out of the 7 rituals and was slated to go through the 7th ritual on Halloween of 1997. And of course, now she was in our home and we were taking her through deliverance. She'd given her life to Christ. So Anton used to say, when the sowing rituals get here, she will either be the bride of Satan or she will be a blood sacrifice to Satan. And if she won't cooperate and we have to sacrifice her, her blood's on your hands because it's your fault that this happened to her. So anyway, that led up to Halloween of 1997. The details of that story are really, they're bizarre on the one hand, they're absolutely wonderful on the others, because that's when Anton kidnapped Deborah Joy. It's a long story, has to do with Trinidadian zombieism, and I wrote about it in a book called The Serpent and the Savior. But in any event, that was the showdown night. We knew it would be. We had a group of 10 intercessors that came over to our house to pray that night. We were going to pray from 10 p.m. up into the witching hour. The witching hour is at 2, from 2 to 3. And we figured we'd be there all night praying. But anyway, before the team got over there, Anton LeVay projected into DJ from our house, from our guest bedroom. He called the police on me. And remember, when a spirit has hijacked a body, if you know what's going on, you can look at their eyes and tell something isn't right. But a lot of people, they just don't know what's going on. It looks like the person has always looked, right? But there's a different spirit that is animating them and talking through them and acting through them. So anyway, from our guest bedroom, she picked up the phone and called the police and said she's being held hostage in our home and had been for the better part of the year. And that I was raping her and torturing her and keeping her confined in our upstairs. And so she was calling in a 911 kidnapping call. So I was out on the front porch praying because I knew, it was Halloween Eve and something would be going down. And cops came up with lights and sirens. The 3 different vehicles came up, and then the 4th one followed later. And when they came up, I stood up to find out what was going on. And she ran out of the front door behind me, cussing at me and telling them he's a rapist, he's evil, he's been torturing me, all kinds of stuff. So you can imagine what that was like. And I tried to, run over, and I knew if I could get a hold of her, I could rebuke the spirit in her and she'd come back to her senses. But they drew down on me, and I was face down on the grass, and it was Deborah Joy's body, but it was being animated by Anton's spirit. And so she's marching around, flipping me off, and, F you, preacher boy, which is what Anton always called me. And it was really a shock that all that was going down. And so they were going to arrest me. We have a ministry in our church called the Trauma Intervention Program, and one of my best friends heads that up. And he has a badge and a hall pass to go past police barriers, right? Because he does trauma intervention on all the 911 calls. So I called him. He was only a block away. He came around the block real quick and got involved. And I told him what was happening. I said, try to get into the back of the police car to talk to the victim and try to put this phone in her sweater pocket so we can track her. So he did that and managed to be successful. he got out and he told the police, he said, this woman has a long mental health history. They said, well, that doesn't matter. You still can't, rape her and torture her. And Lou said, well, yeah, but the point is you're about to arrest a man that has a really good reputation around here in a large church. And you're about to arrest him on the witness of a frequent flyer at mental health. And if you're wrong about it, y'all are going to lose your jobs. So they recanted. They told me, we're not going to arrest you right now, but we're going to put you under house arrest. Don't have any contact with her. If we find out you're trying to recontact with her, we will arrest you.
Dang.
So that was Halloween Eve of 1997. They drove off with her in the back of a police car, flipping me off out the back window with both hands. And I thought, wow, Anton's been telling me for months that come celebration that we'll find out why he serves Lucifer instead of Christ, who he always called the pathetic weakling. So we started praying and didn't know what to do. And so I went in and I told him my dad's a gunsmith and we grew up riding and shooting. And I went in and strapped up with a couple of 45s and extra mags. And I was going to go up to the Satanic Ranch and just throw down and go Old Testament on them up there and see if I could rescue her. And so I headed up the road alone. I told Cheryl and Lou, who is the elder that does trauma intervention, I said, you guys go over to Hell Motel. That was just a nickname we had for an old motel where a lot of witches and druids and warlocks and Satanists lived. I said, go over to Hell Motel and see if that's a rendezvous point. Astral projection, if Anton's out and about on the astral plane, his body has to be somewhere safe, right? And so I said he might be astral projecting from Hell Motel. And if so, that'll be the rendezvous point for him to leave, who we now would call DJ. That stands for Deborah Joy. But I said he'll need to leave DJ and go back into his body, and then they'll head up the mountain. So they might be headed over there. So anyway, I went John Wayne. I was going up to the Satanic Ranch, and I got a call from him that DJ had got out of a police car and was headed into Hell Motel. So I changed course, went over there. On the way over, she discovered, or, Anton was animating her still, but Anton discovered the phone in her pocket. Actually, as soon as they let her out of the police car and Lou and Cheryl said they saw her, I called that phone number. He answered it. He said, very clever, preacher boy. He said, it's too late, but it was a good idea. And he said, we'll drink Ray Ray's blood tonight in honor of Lucifer, the Dark Lord. And it'll be your fault because you served the pathetic weakling. And I told you all along, Lucifer was more powerful. And I would demonstrate that to you tonight. Said a lot of other things that were too vile to repeat, but, about raping us all and killing us all eventually. But anyway, he hung up the phone, and I got one of those God thoughts, just a very strong, clear thought that comes into the mind. And it was to pray for Anton's silver cord to be cut. And so I called Cheryl, and I called the head of our prayer team that was back at our house, Jill Underhill. And I said, let's all pray for God to cut the silver cord on Anton. And I remember Jill said, won't that kill him? And I said, yeah, it will kill him, but it's either him or Ray Ray. And we're not going to let him kill DJ tonight. So I'll pray that. So I was standing in the road with the car door open and praying for God to cut Anton's silver cord. It was about 10 o'clock, maybe 10 after 10 on Halloween Eve. Suddenly DJ came running out the door and said, help me, Dad, help me. We got her in the car and started driving home, and she said Anton bounced, which is a term that means someone who has ventured out onto the astral plane is trying to get back into their body, but they've been out too long, or for some reason they can't re-enter their body. Let's all pray for God to cut the silver cord on Anton. Let's all pray for God to cut the silver cord on Anton. Let's all pray for God to cut the silver cord on Anton. So they call it bouncing. And because you at that point you become a disembodied spirit, i.e., you are dead. So anyway,
Dave, real quick, can you explain the silver cord to people listening and to us just that don't understand that completely?
yeah, sure. We're comprised of spirit, soul, and body. Our spirit and soul are united together and almost a seamless unity. It's our mind, will, emotions, and affections, along with that divine life that comes from God, that is the spirit. So anyway, that entity, which is the spirit soul, is given the right to animate a physical body in the time-space continuum for a certain amount of time. It's called human life. But that means that a spirit soul is able to occupy and operate through a physical body. If that spirit soul leaves that physical body, which, by the way, we all do when we go into deep REM sleep, we disengage a tiny bit. And if you can see in the spirit world, if you see somebody asleep, you can tell, A, if they're asleep, B, how deeply they're sleeping by how disintegrated their spirit soul is with their physical body, because it just rises and kind of floats above it. But my point is that spirit soul can come all the way out of that body. And that's, people who are lucid dreamers, they have those experiences all the time. That's what happens also in astral projection. You come out of your physical body. If there's ever a separation between the spirit soul and the physical body, there will be a translucent, silvery cord that goes from the heart region of the spirit man into the heart region of the physical body. That's called the silver cord. Now, that is the right that spirit soul has to occupy that body. If that is cut, that spirit soul no longer has access to that body, at which point the body immediately dies and eventually returns to dust. And the spirit is now a wandering spirit. And of course, if they're godly, they can be taken into the heavens. If they're ungodly, taken into the nether regions. And there's also the phenomena of wandering spirits, but we don't have time to get into that. But in any event, it's the silver cord that attaches the spirit soul to the body. And when that silver cord is cut, that is what we call physical death. And so that's what we prayed for, is for that silver cord to be cut. So Anton would die. And in doing that, Deborah Joy would be saved. And so what happened is when she come and jumped into the car, she said, Anton bounced. I said, we were praying for that. She said, well, it obviously worked. She said, I came to my senses, of course, as soon as the spirit man left her, then she was in control of her senses again. She said, I came to my senses. I saw that his spirit was trying to get into his body and couldn't gain access to the body. And the whole coven gathered around and started conjuring and, doing this satanic Lord's Prayer and all that kind of stuff. They were doing everything they knew to do to try to generate evil power to help him get back into his body. But because they were so preoccupied with the Black Pope, she jumped up and ran out the door, and there I was waiting for her. So anyway, we got back to the house, and I told everybody, thank you for praying. Deborah says we were successful. God cut Anton's silver cord and rescued her. And so we were all thanking the Lord, and something happened to her that was so intense. It's the most intense thing I've seen in deliverance, but her eyes went reptilian and bright red, like a dragon's eyes. And this voice spoke out of her to me. She looked at me. She said, you're a murderer. You killed the Black Pope. And I said, who are you? And the spirit said, I'm Leviathan, Anton's power spirit. And of course, he had a power spirit that took the shape of a snake, like on the Harry Potter movies. But anyway, that snake that was around his neck, actually, that was just a carnate expression of Leviathan, his power spirit. But anyway, that spirit was talking through Deborah and extremely angry at all of us, but me in particular, said, you killed the Black Pope. And I said, well, what business do you have with Deborah Joy? And it said, Ray is his direct descendant. And so I could come into her if I want to. I said, no, you know that's not the deal. She's renounced Satanism. She's renounced Anton. And I just commanded him in Jesus' name to leave her, which he did. And when that happened, we all just kind of looked around. There were, I guess, 11, I guess there were 12 of us there. We looked around the room and said, wow, that was surreal. That obviously Anton's dead. That we just heard it from Leviathan. And so we were thanking God for his mercy. And suddenly a woman spoke through DJ again to me and said, you murderer, you killed my father. Well, by virtue of the fact that it was a woman and she was talking about Anton as her father, I knew it was either Carla or Zena, both who were there that night. And so I just asked it. I said, are you Carla or are you Zena? She said, I'm Zena. I hate you. You're a murderer. You killed my father. And I said, well, only God has the power to do those things, but we did pray that he would do it. And he obviously saw fit to do it. And I said, so here's the deal, Zena. We asked God to cut your father's silver cord because he had left his body and was in DJ just like you are right now. So if you don't immediately leave her, we're going to ask God to cut your silver cord. And she instantly said, don't do that. I'll go. And she was gone.
Wow.
And so we all looked at each other and blinked a few times and said, wow, that's amazing. Obviously, Anton's dead. And the coven knows that God cut a silver cord and they respect that. So, we worshiped the Lord and talked and prayed and celebrated that night. Then, of course, the next day we heard news that Anton had died. Though the Church of Satan wouldn't allow for news of how he really died to get out. So they said that he had a heart attack and was down in the Bay Area and blah, 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 blah. Michael Aquino wrote the official Church of Satan statement about what happened that night, but they put it the next night. And that's why, I don't know if they've changed it, but Wikipedia said there's some confusion about when he actually died. But we know when he actually died because we were there. And it was about 10 after 10 in 1997 on October 30th, which, remember, the occult Halloween rituals start for them at midnight on the 31st. But anyway, that's the story. And Ray's, she goes by Deborah Joy. We call her DJ. She married a man that came through one of our rehabs. And she's living in a state far, far away. And they've been married for 13 years and serving God and doing fine. And it's a really beautiful story of the power of Christ to deliver people. So there you have it. That's the story.
Dave, how do you go back to pastoring after that?
Well, we never did really go back to what we were doing. I do seminars all over the world on spiritual warfare and deliverance. And I've written one book. I'm writing 3 others right now. The book I wrote is called The Serpent the Savior. It tells the story basically that I told you just now. And then I'm writing one called All Things Weird and Wonderful to tell about some of the stories I've been involved with since 1997. And then I'm doing a sequel to that is a little hairier, a little wilder on occult level deliverance. Because you talk about blurry, things get downright blurry. But anyway, one book a lot of people will be able to read. If they make it through that, okay, still have heart for it. I'm doing a book called Slaying the Jabberwock, and that'll be stories of occult level deliverance. And then I'm working on a book called The Warrior's Field Manual to Spiritual Warfare and Deliverance. So anyway, I still pastor the Church of Glad Tidings. We're still involved in finding, meeting urgent needs, find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. We still do a lot of compassion ministries. But in addition to that, we do a lot of deliverance. We, at our church, every other Tuesday night, we have a strongholds class, and we do tearing down the strongholds of whatever subject it happens to be. And then we pray deliverance over people, much like the movie that's out now, Come Out in Jesus' Name. I don't know if you've seen that, but anyway, it's a story of Greg Locke and how they got involved in deliverance. But we've been doing that for 30 years now. And so it's a regular event around Glad Tidings.
Dude, Dave, we're going to need to do like a part 2 of All Things Weird and Wonderful and get into some of those stories. Seriously.
That was like 10 podcast episodes worth of stuff that you dropped there.
Yeah. I know, from the Thunderbird to the Silver. Yeah, there's a lot. It's interesting. One of the things I thought about, and I don't know if you've ever found the correlation, but when you were talking about when you met with the daughter in the vampire cult, that's very eerily similar to what happened with Rod Farrell. The story of the vampire cult, that was in '97.
Yeah,
when they had the vampire cult, and they ended up murdering the girl's mother, and
yep.
It was very eerily similar to what was happening, almost at the same time as what DJ's daughter there was attempting to do to her.
Yeah, right.
So I found that just eerily strange, because that's a very well known. There's like a movie about the vampire cult and Rod Farrell and him and the murders that they went on, and they lived or attempted to live as vampires, but the things they were doing is very, very similar to what the things you described with the Judas ritual and that.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think some pastors sort of get baptized into the blurry verse and know a lot of what you're talking about, and other pastors seem to be like, everything we talked about is like a conspiracy theory to them, and they're trying to lead people, and we're trying to combat and have spiritual warfare, but it seems as though, like we found on our podcast, we found sort of a lane, because everything you're talking about, at this point in our show, I think early on in the show might have been a little bizarre, but now where we are 3 years into this, it's not. And why do you think that's the case so often in the church?
Well, first of all, let me say that the further away you get from Western Christianity in the world, the less that is the case. So if you go into some of the African nations, or deep into India somewhere, or the islands of the sea, there's a pervasive understanding of spiritual realism. So in a nutshell, the problem with the West is that we have done exactly what the Bible tells us not to do. The Bible says, do not lean on your own understanding, but in all your ways, acknowledge the divine. Acknowledging the divine is all of the above. It's a pervasive realism in the spirit world, because God created everything, the fallen ones and the angels of light and everything in between. It's all God. It's the creation of God, and it's the realm of God, the realm of the spirit world. Well, rationalism, which of course came through Rene Descartes and what we call the Enlightenment, which spiritually speaking was an endarkenment. But rationalism basically says, if I don't understand it, I don't have to believe it. Well, rationalism does exactly the opposite of what Scripture tells you to do. Rationalism leans on its own understanding, and that becomes the filter for truth. But if you honestly read Scripture, it's an extremely supernatural book. Old Testament, there's supernatural realism all through it. In the New Testament, supernatural realism all through it. And so in the West, Western Christianity is really not biblical Christianity. It's been defanged, so to speak. It's been castrated. It doesn't have any life or virtue left in it, because it's just a Western form of religious rationalism. And see, I speak about this all over the world, but in America, people are scared to death to have me come to their church because they're like, well, you're not going to teach about exorcisms, are you? You're not going to talk about angels or demons. Well, that's really the subject of the Bible, is the interaction between real celestial beings, both fallen and those that are in the
God's
Spirit
team,
of God.
Kingdom team. Yeah.
But anyway, that's what the book's about, is this convergence on earth of these kingdoms fighting for one another, to the point that when Jesus' disciples said, what should we pray for? He said, pray that the kingdom of heaven will be established in the earth, so that the will of God can be done in the earth in the same way it's done in the heavens. And though that is the central theme, that's what Jesus told his disciples to pray about. The church in the West doesn't believe that. They don't even believe that it can happen or will happen. They're certainly not a part of making it happen. And so I have very low regard for Western religion. I call it the great American religious enterprise. And it's essentially powerless. It's void of efficacy for anybody. It does nobody any good, which is why America fell to hell in a handbasket with a church on every corner. But those pastors, you think about a pastor confronting a demon, 99% of the pastors in America were afraid to confront a trumped up flu virus. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
The COVID con happens, like, oh my God, let's all stay home and, put a bag over our head or something so we won't get the flu. So we're a million miles from authentic Christianity. And not only is there all that backdrop of religion, which religion always militates against spiritual realism. But not only is there all that, but there is a massive problem with good old-fashioned cowardice. Like Cheryl and I have had gangbangers in our house for 30 years. We take people in off the street, demonized to the hair roots. I can tell you stories all day long, guys, about wild deliverances, because we've been doing it, since 1997 and doing it almost constantly. So anyway, but to be able to do that, you have to actually believe, not just preach about it once in a while. You have to actually believe that because God is with you, you have nothing to fear. That's what David said. God is with me. I do not fear evil. And evil comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. But if you don't fear it, then you don't fear it. And so, a demonized guy, the last guy that lived with us he's 270-pound, big old boy. His street name is Psycho Mike. Know what berserker spirits are? You ever heard of berserker spirits?
It's like the Vikings. Yeah, the Vikings, right?
Yeah.
They did the berserkers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The berserkers. But they transmogrify people into, superhuman beasts, right? And that's what shut down the Romans when they were trying to take over that part of the world. That's why they built the wall. Remember the wall that said, this is the end of the world? What they were saying is, whatever the heck is over there is otherworldly. This is the end of the world as we know it. That's because of the Picts, the P-I-K-S, the Picts. They were Odin worshipers, and they conjured berserker spirits. And one berserker would take on a whole Roman legion. And so anyway, but my point is, here we had Psycho Mike, who had berserker spirits living in our guest bedroom. Yeah, he went demonic and came after me with the butcher knife twice. But that would scare the bejeebers out of most Christian leaders. And what that tells you is, even though they know the verses about fearing no evil, they're not living in the power of the reality of that verse. They are afraid of evil because they question whether or not God's with them. And so the state of the great American religious enterprise in America is, it's very, very weak. It's very powerless. That's why it's lost credibility. And so many people, there are millions of people that just quit going to church because they thought, well, what's the point? There's no significant life impact to this. It's just sort of like a religious social club. And I tell you what, you have a church that someone's liable to go demonic any given meeting. It changes everything. And what happens, like at Glad Tidings, I did this a couple of months ago. I said, how many people here have cast a demon out of somebody? Almost the entire group put their hands up, including teenagers. Like, yeah, I've done that. Well, when you get a group of people like that, religious people don't fit in well, and like attracts like. So right now we have a guy moving here that heard that we did deliverance. I just talked to him a couple of days ago. And I said, yeah, if you want to throw down and get it on, come join our happy club. We are, one of our mottos is get free, stay free, help other people get free.
Yeah. Just go John Wayne. Just go John Wayne on it.
Exactly.
I love that, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking, like, for the younger people, it's like Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
So like,
right.
I'm just about to,
right.
I have a certain particular set of skills that,
right. Right.
This
exactly.
is Dave. Yeah, this is Dave rolling in, being like,
that's
all right.
Well, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard to relate. We entered. Dan Duvall. Dan Duvall.
Yeah, I know Dan.
Okay.
I did some stuff with them back at Sid Ross a few years ago.
You remind me of. You're in this space. You're so deep in. He said on our show, he's like, I have a hard time relating with average people because I'm so far down this rabbit hole.
Right.
And it's controversial when those kinds of guys come on our show. You can see it rattles the cages of a lot of Christians who listen, and so to have everything in nice, neat boxes, and then guys like you and Dan just dump them all out and be like, "Let's go, let's talk." Right?
Yeah.
So
But I think you make a great point, and we've talked about it on the show, Dave, is that when you get out of the West, you get to Sub-Saharan Africa, you get to go to Haiti, you go to the Caribbean, you go to Southeast Asia, you get like the places you talked about. They live in a very real supernatural paradigm, right? Like when you're sick, you go see the witch doctor, and they do rituals, right?
Right.
And they interact with the spiritual. That is part of the culture, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's why there's such a knee-jerk reaction in the West, is because it has been taken out of our cultural paradigm, right?
Yeah.
This idea that in a lot of ways that the supernatural is something else. It's woo-woo. It doesn't exist in the empirical world. Right. And yet, so that's why I love having these conversations, because it's always a great reminder that the Bible is very, very, we'd say blurry on our show, but very, very supernatural. There was no division of that. Old Testament, New Testament, as you said, right? There was no, that was the paradigm they lived in. That is the reality of the paradigm we actually live in, whether you acknowledge it or not. Exactly. Paul talks about it, right? Says that what's the unseen is more real than what we see, etc. Right. People who listen to the show are probably tired of me saying this, but this is something that comes up. It's just a reminder. This is very biblical. We're talking about things that that we're finding biblical basis for, scriptural basis for, that Christ did, and
right.
And so I love these stories, man. I feel like we could do a 6-hour podcast, and I would love to get into some of your other stories. Probably another time, maybe do a follow up, because I think you've got so much cool stuff to share. You've been in the trenches, as you say, since '97, and I really love that you're from Yuba City, man. Not from, but you're in Yuba City, because it is. It's a place like I can put my finger on the map. But I've been through there. Hundreds of times, right? Like I can picture you at Glad Tidings.
Right.
Nate practiced in the back of the church. So, Nate
That's
was back
awesome.
there. So the young ginger.
That's
just
awesome.
living his band dreams.
Yeah,
there's something special going on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're grateful. So tell everybody, Dave, where they can find your work, perhaps interact with some of the things you're doing, or interact with you directly, because I know that people will want to, on our show, will want to peruse what your books, website, whatever it is you're doing, and check it out. Maybe even reach out. So let everybody know where they can do that.
Okay, right. So it's churchofgladtidings.com. That's churchofgladtidings.com. You can go. There's a store. You can get my book, The Serpent and the Savior, there, or you can get any of the Isaiah 61 summit that we do. It's coming up again in October. If anybody wants to join us live, we do it every 6 months at Glad Tidings, and then we do it around the world as we schedule things. But anyway, twice at home. It's coming up the second week of October, and that's a full week. We start on a Monday night, Then we go from 9 to 9 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We have breaks, of course, for lunch and dinner, but that's really full, 9 to 9. And then we end Friday at about 12 or 1. And the whole week, we're focused on spiritual warfare and deliverance. We have teaching. We have opportunity to pray over people. There's private sessions, and then we do corporate deliverance sessions. So you can sign up for that. But all of those different sessions from the Isaiah 61, you can get those in CDs or DVDs at the website there. So again, awesome. It's churchofgladtidings.com, and you can get everything you might need to get there. Also, I'm GT Dave at Truth Social. A lot of people follow me there. That's GT Dave at Truth Social. And then the last thing I want to say, if there's young people out there that have little regard for religion, but want to really get it on in true spirituality, we are starting a School of Champions. We're starting it in January, and it's going to be hip hop and happening. And I don't know of any school like this anywhere in the world, because we're doing the stuff. We're not just talking about it. So that School of Champions, you can check that out on our website also. And if you're, it's not for the faint of heart. So, but if you want to chuck it down to the cob and get it on, then think about School of Champions, because it'll change your life. I guarantee you that.
I love it. I love it.
Love it, Dave.
I appreciate it,
No
Dave.
days off, baby. No days off.
Come on.
Dave,
let's go.
Well, I'd love to have you back on the show and sort of give us a little bit of schooling on break down the different planes and how the spiritual world works, because I think we tap into things you so boldly talked about. You have this framework, you understand how things work, and I think a lot of times Christians, we look into this whole spiritual world and we're all confused. No one really taught us. Nobody has experiences to back up their claims. It's just a lot of and so we're all kind of fumbling through, trying to figure out what the heck's going on in our world right now.
Right.
You got aliens showing up. You got crazy attacks happening in Peru, which we're going to break down tomorrow. You've got, you've got disclosure happening on a government level. You've got Bigfoot coming out. You're going to go hang out with them. So,
yeah, don't forget about us there, man.
I won't forget about you.
That is so wild, bro.
But you bring, you got guys chasing you with knives every other day. And it's cool. It's cool. It's very encouraging to hear your story. Thank you for coming on our podcast. We have we've got a lot of people who know something's going on out there that don't necessarily know where they fit in, but they've had blurry experiences, and a lot of people are coming back to God. And I think this podcast has changed Luke and I's life.
That's awesome, guys.
We sort of didn't realize what asking questions about Bigfoot would do and where it would take you.
Yeah, but hey, man, your answer still it's on the Mount Rushmore of blurry answers about thoughts on Bigfoot. So you made it, Dave.
That's right.
Put you up there, buddy.
All right,
well,
guys.
Hey, great for your time. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Dave. Have fun and on your vacation.
If you can play Pebble there in Carmel, let me know. That's on my bucket list, bro.
Okay. All right, guys. God bless you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Yes, sir.
See you.